would you say, how would you compare these two readings? So we had The Irony of Life, which was quite short. My Life with COVID-19, May 2020, is quite a bit longer and gets into quite a bit more detail about some of the things we talked about during our little brainstorm. So what did you guys pick up on? I have some notes up there. But what did you guys, what stuck out for you? Which one did you like better and why?
I like the second one better.
Okay, why, Anna? Why was that one more enjoyable for you?
Like to read? Do you mean to read or to...
Or to listen to, or to read?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of this writing belongs to all of us.
Ah.
We can feel with it.
Yep, we can relate to it, right? Yeah. What were some of the points? So I have up here concert routine. So she starts out with Frozen, like her daughter's supposed to be in a little play about like the movie Frozen, right? And it's canceled. So she gets us hooked in with that. It's a really good hook, telling a little story, right? Then she goes on to talk about changing routines. What does she say about nature?
Going outside, you know.
Yeah. So would you guys say that's been a pretty big theme during COVID, that nature has been a help for people?
I would say.
Yeah, I would say for myself, my family's gone on so many hikes. We liked hiking before the pandemic, but now it just helps us a lot. What else?
That's when we have tried to stay in social distance, right?
Yep.
Only with your family there?
Yeah.
The way when, like, if her daughter wanted to go to college.
Yes. Yeah, college plans, right? So she has a big thing in there about plans changing and how to plan. Sometimes we're left with all these questions. We're used to like trying to figure out what's going to happen in our life, but we can't now. That's taken away from us, right? So college plans, in general, plans are hard to make. Yeah. What else stuck out for you guys?
How, like she says, their family has enjoyed having slower schedules.
Yes. Slower schedules.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What does she say about? I have here headlines, mixed messages. How do you guys feel about that?
It's confusing.
It's confusing. Yeah. So there are hugely mixed messages in our media, and it's so confusing to know what to do, right?
Or what is true.
Or what is true and what's not true, right? So she's talking about the early days. I remember this too, when they were very concerned about surfaces, right? And now they're saying, don't worry about surfaces, it's mostly air. But then you hear, no, do the surfaces again. No, do 2 masks. No. It's information overload, right? And you don't know what's true, you don't know what to follow. So you have to really, really think all the time about what you're supposed to do, right? What else? What about, I have here, occupations, job affected. She can't ship flowers. So she's a florist. She can't ship her flowers. Her business is affected, right? So we hear a lot about businesses being affected. Yeah. So that might be something, I don't know if your kids would be interested in that in the future. So businesses are very affected by this. And she gives quite an image of like Holland, where they grow lots of flowers, had to mow, like, can you imagine mowing over all those beautiful flowers?
That would hurt.
Oh, and then throwing it into the ocean, right? And she gets kind of poetic and says, I hope the fragrance of those flowers spreads some hope, better days.
Wouldn't it probably been better to leave it on the land, right?
Maybe, let it decompose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever.
What else? She mentioned some very common themes here. Feeling isolated, restricted, flights, right? That's a huge one. Yeah, so feelings of isolation. Flights canceled. Has anybody been tempted to get on a plane and get the heck out of here?
Oh, sure. But
of course.
It doesn't help anything. No matter where you go, it's all the same, right?
Yeah. And then she talks about things that have helped her, gardening and an online writing group or course or something. And then one thing that we haven't touched on yet, which is pretty huge for a lot of people, faith. So what about guys? Is that something you would include in your letter to your future, for your children to read in the future about faith? Right? Churches closed. Like, we can't imagine. If someone would have told us this would all happen like 3 years ago, we'd be like, no way, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts of something that stuck out for you in her story? Okay. You do.
Better days are coming.
Better days are coming. Yeah, better days are coming. You do have 2 more stories there. For the sake of time, to give you guys a lot of time for writing and working on all the things you're working on today, I won't do this same thing with the other 2 stories, but I would encourage you to read them and to make little notes, because the purpose of all of this is to help us gather ideas for this letter that we want to write to the future. So let's very briefly think of, first of all, does everybody have a copy of the Tower writing process to help us through? If you don't have one, I can give you one. It's another really good thing to keep at the front of your binder. If you don't have a copy, I think I gave them some out on Monday.
Maybe have one from last year somewhere, but
Okay, I will hand you another one.
if you have an extra
I
one,
haven't
don't
punched
mind.
it, so I can punch it for you. Does anybody else need one? Anybody else?
I have one.
You have one? Natty, you
I
have
have 2.
You have 2, okay. You're really gonna know the writing process.
I have.
You have one, okay, perfect. So, when we're thinking 2 things. First of all, who's gonna read this? Who's my audience? So I've already suggested. This is a suggestion. If you want to write something entirely different about COVID, if you want to write more of a story to the whole world, you can do that. But I was trying to give you an audience, which would be a child or future child. And what's your purpose? And here our purpose would be to write a letter. And that already tells us what the format is going to look like, how we're going to organize it. So our purpose is to write a letter to explain. And then you're going to say, well, what do I want to explain? Do I want to explain my feelings? Do I want to explain just the cut and dry serious things of how things are going? So the serious facts. Or maybe I want to combine those 2. So you're starting to think, like, what exactly do I want to tell my child? Do I want to tell my child how I think they're doing through all of this? Or do I want to tell my child how I'm doing through all of this, right? So it's really open. And this idea of thinking about it beforehand is just to get you started. You might get on a roll and you might change your thinking totally, and that's totally fine. All right, then we got to think, and we might want to brainstorm, so do a bit of a brainstorm. Does anybody know right now off the bat, just looking at some of these ideas or just thinking in your own mind, what are some of the main things you want your child to know or remember that happened during COVID? Like, do you know right away, like, of course, I'm going to include something about churches or faith, or for sure I'm going to include something about how we all really went on a lot of hikes together. Is there something like immediately you know you're going to write about when it comes to COVID? No? Okay. So that's why we were doing this reading. I was hoping that some of these would, and read the other 2 as well, the Better Days and the Pandemic Road Trip, because they might spark some ideas for you as well. But what are some possibilities? If you don't know for sure yourself what you're going to include, what are some possibilities about what we could tell our children about?
Maybe my son, he said that we should have made connections before COVID, so at least we had someone out there. And also, because now it was hard to make connections. And one time in the beginning, I came here to Winkler with my children, and we couldn't go into any washroom, and all 3 of them needed to go to the washroom.
Okay.
And it felt really stuck.
Right. So maybe your letter, Natty, is going to be very memory based. Maybe you'll have one, and now I'm already getting into the organizing, but maybe you'll have one paragraph that's addressed to Gabriel, one to Ashni, and one to Adashni, right? Maybe you'll address each of them, or maybe you'll write separate letters, one to each of them. Maybe your letters will be about all the memories of things you've done, right, during this time, or things that they've said to you that you're not going to forget, right? Yeah. Anybody else know, or what are some possible things? So for sure, maybe we want to start talking about memories to to our children. This one, the pandemic road trip is interesting. The mother's talking day by day what happened. So it's more of like a journal or a log. But I'll never forget when we got the announcement, we were, on our way to do this or do that, right? Maybe you'll start with the beginning. What was it like when you first heard that this was happening, right?
And the first wave of it wasn't nearly as bad as the second.
Okay, so maybe you're going to talk about the waves. All right, maybe you'll mention the waves.
Because the first wave, we didn't even have to wear a mask.
Okay,
And
masks. There we go. What are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about masks in your, who would have thought 2 years ago that you would be wearing a mask? Now I just grab it all the time. I stop my car, even when I get home, I stop my car, I grab my mask and put it on. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm just going in my house. Then I put it down, right? So you could say, talk about that, about the mask part, because that's something they might not believe in the future. Or your grandchildren, if you want to make this to your grandchildren, who hopefully won't have to go through this, you could say, we had to wear masks anywhere we went. And, people tell stories about the cops coming in and MCC in Altona. My students in Altona said, the cops were at MCC and they made these girls leave and all this kind of stuff. So masks might be something for sure that we want to mention.
yeah, we also weren't allowed to have gatherings.
Okay, gatherings. That will be, you could have a whole, you could have a whole paragraph. This is why this brainstorming is good, because you're thinking, is you could have a whole paragraph that's just about the restrictions, right? And then you could say how you feel about those restrictions within that paragraph, right? Or how they felt about it if you're writing it to your children. This is how you responded when we couldn't get to the bathroom in Walmart. The bathroom wasn't open. So you wanna
I
think?
said the other day the masks are just as bad as our phones,
Yeah.
because we can't go nowhere without our phone.
Right.
Now the mask already became the same thing,
Yeah. Put that humor in there.
Yeah,
Anna.
it's just
That's awesome.
natural thing to grab both of us.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I need.
Yeah, so I would highly suggest doing a brainstorm before you start. First of all, think, who am I going to write this to, and how do I want to write this letter? And then do a brainstorm about all the possible things you could include. Then you want to organize a little bit. And what are some important things to think about when we're organizing a letter? And this is a personal letter, it's not a business letter. A business letter looks quite different. It has an official address, your address, the business's address, and we're not doing business letters. This is to a personal letter. But what should all letters still have?
Subject, right?
For sure, yeah. But they should have a date, and usually we put the date in the top left-hand corner or the top right-hand corner. Is there someone who prefers one side?
I prefer right hand.
You do? Okay, I'm a lefty. I put my date over here, but some people put it over here. Either spot is okay. Then what do we have next in a letter? A personal letter.
Greeting.
A greeting, yes. So a dear or whatever you want to put there. Dear is the most common, of course. And then a comma in the person's name. Then in the first paragraph of a letter, it's actually much like an essay or a personal narrative. You're introducing kind of that you're writing, why you're writing this letter. So you don't say, I'm writing this letter to you because, but you might say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about COVID these days, my dear one, or whatever, but you're introducing, you have somewhat of an introduction. Even if you want to say, my teacher is making me write this, you can say that, but you have some kind of an introduction, and then you have paragraphs, right? You can have as many paragraphs as you want in your letter, but the important part is that each paragraph is focusing on a certain kind of subject or idea. And as soon as you start switching that idea, that's when you know you need to start a new paragraph. But that's where your organizing comes in. If you've done a good brainstorm, you might know, okay, I'm going to begin by talking with how I feel about the pandemic in general, or how I felt when it started. And then maybe I already know my last paragraph is going to be how I feel now, how I feel at this moment. That says how I feel at the moment. Can you read that? And then maybe you've decided what you're going to focus on in here. You're going to focus on maybe one paragraph for each child, or maybe you're going to focus on the topic. Like, this is how you've been dealing with masks and I've been dealing with masks. We have to wear them everywhere, yada, yada, yada. So this kind of helps you to figure out where you're going to put what. And then you just want to go ahead and write your letter after that. This is kind of a really informal writing assignment, but what I'm trying to do is just help people through the process. It's really, it should be more relaxed than that. If you just feel like you want to do a little bit of brainstorming and then get straight into writing without thinking too much about organizing, go for it. Then later you can fiddle around with it. But that's where writing is really creative. You can do lots of, it gets messy, and it's supposed to be messy. So that's a good thing. Yeah, so think about it a bit, organize how you think it will look on your page, and then just begin writing. And the editing and revising, that I'll help you with and we can look at later.
Is this like an assignment or?
You can totally use it for your portfolio if you want to. So for you guys, for stage 3, I forget, I have on my thing where it would fit in. But if you do some planning, writing assignment number 1 in both stage 2 and stage 3 is making a pre-writing plan. So if you do the brainstorming and thinking about your audience and your purpose, and you make a bit of an outline where you have some notes about what you're going to put in your letter, that can count for writing assignment 1. And then for stage 2, this counts for writing assignment 2, messages, letters, and reports. So you can stick that in there. And for stage 3, we can find a place to stick this writing in somewhere where you need it. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to make it less focused on stage work right now, just because it's getting
I wasn't here Monday, so I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
know if you had
Yep.
worked on, if this was an assignment from Monday or what.
No, this just, we're talking about this today. We're kind of leading into it on Monday by talking about stories and how important stories are. And we visited that site I showed you where I got these stories, and you can watch people who've put their stories in digital form. I just warned everybody that it gets kind of addicting because you start watching all these people's life stories, which are fascinating. Did anybody get a chance to go back to the website and look at some of those stories? No. Joy has done one, a digital story in her lifetime, with a project like Story Center. That one was called Community Works, I think, right, Joy? Yeah. It was a couple years ago. Yeah. And Margarita Giesbrecht did one.
Okay.
Hers is actually online. Yeah, you can go and watch it. I can send you the link. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Yeah. So we just, on Monday, we just kind of got into that idea of storytelling and how important it is to tell these stories. And we used to pass on our stories very orally, especially the Mennonites, I think, because they didn't have a written Low German before, wasn't a written language. I know some people write Low German now, but I think Low German was much more oral, telling stories, passing on stories and stuff. But if we put it in writing, we can go back and read it. So, yeah. Any other questions? I know some of you have other things you're working on too. So we don't have school on Friday, there's no rush on this. If you feel like you're getting really into this writing, and you're not ready to do any more new writing next week, just let me know. We can keep working on this.
So you didn't have a new assignment then for this?
No.